In graph theory, we say that two vertices in a graph are adjacent if they are connected by an edge. Now, a more formal way of saying that is that if we have some graph G with a vertex set V and edge set E, then the vertices A and B are adjacent to each other if there exists an edge A, B within the edge set. So that's just a more mathematically formal way of stating adjacency. So let's check out an example. Let's say we have this graph right here with vertices A, B, C, and D. Let's identify which vertices are adjacent and which ones are non-adjacent. So we can see that vertex A right here and vertex B are connected by an edge. So that means they are adjacent to each other. So we would say that A and B are adjacent. Next, we can see that vertex B and vertex C are also connected by an edge. So B and C are also adjacent. And then we can see that vertex B and vertex D are also connected by an edge. So B and D are adjacent. And then lastly, we can see that vertex C and vertex D are also connected by an edge. So they are also adjacent to each other. So those are all of our pairs of adjacent vertices. Now let's identify the non-adjacent vertices. So we can see that vertex A and vertex C are not connected by an edge, so that means they are non-adjacent. So we'll say A and C, it's our first pair of non-adjacent edges. And then we can also see that vertex A and vertex D are also not connected directly by an edge, so they are also non-adjacent. So we'll say A and D. So these are our two pairs of non-adjacent vertices. So that's the idea behind adjacent vertices. It's a pretty straightforward idea. No need to overcomplicate it. We simply say that two vertices are adjacent if they are connected by an edge. All right, now consider the following scenario. Given graph G with vertex set V that contains the vertices A, B, C, D, and E, and edge set E that contains the following edges, determine if the following pairs of vertices are adjacent. So let's check out this first pair of vertices, A and B. Given this information right here, how can we tell if A and B are adjacent in this graph? Well, we know that vertices A and B are both in the graph because they're both contained in the vertex set here. So we know they're both vertices in the graph. To determine if they're adjacent, what we have to do is look at the edge set. Now recall that an edge set E tells us all of the edges in a graph, and it does so by telling us the names of the vertices that each edge connects. So for example, this very first edge, A, B, what that means is that there's some edge in graph G where A and B are the endpoints of the edge. So in other words, A and B must be adjacent vertices because they must be connected by this edge. So when we're trying to determine if vertices A and B are adjacent to each other, all we have to do is see if A, B exists in this edge set, which we can see it does. It's the very first set in this edge set. So we would say that yes, A and B must be adjacent vertices. Now let's consider our second example. Are B and C adjacent? Well, all we have to do is look at our edge set and see if we can find a set that contains B and C. So it looks like there is not any set that contains B and C. So these two vertices, although they're both vertices in the graph, they are not adjacent to each other. Now let's consider vertices C and E. So if we look at our edge set, we can identify C and E is an edge in our graph, so they must be adjacent to each other. So we'll say yes. And then if we consider vertices A and D, if we look in our edge set, we can't find any set that contains A and D, so they must not be adjacent to each other, since there's not an edge that connects those two vertices. And then lastly, if we consider vertices D and E, it looks like we cannot find that in the edge set either. So those must also not be adjacent to each other. So that is how you can determine if two vertices in a graph are adjacent to each other if you're just given the vertex set and the edge set.